HOA claimed my flagpole was a visual hazard until they saw what was inside the flag. The HOA told me my flagpole was a visual hazard, an eyesore to the neighborhood. What they didn't know was what was inside the flag. My father didn't die for this country to have his memory taken down like trash. So when they came for the pole, I made sure they saw what was really flying above my home. That day, I didn't just raise a flag, I raised a storm. The flag they wanted to bury. It started with a letter, plain white envelope, typed in bland Times New Roman font, cold as the HOA's usual tone. Dear Mr. Carter, it has come to our attention that the flagpole in your front yard violates community aesthetic guidelines. Please remove it within 7 days to avoid penalties. That was it. No explanation, no phone call, just a veiled threat under the cloak of policy. I sat on the porch holding the letter, my fingers tightening around the page until it crumpled. My flagpole, my father's flagpole. The same one he raised the day he returned home from his second deployment in Iraq, limping, burned, but alive. And when he passed away from cancer 10 years later, likely from the toxins he was exposed to overseas, I installed the pole again in his memory. But now the HOA decided it didn't fit the aesthetic. Too tall, distracting, unaligned with neighborhood symmetry, all code for one thing. They didn't like it. I moved into the Morning Pines subdivision in Georgia 5 years ago. Clean streets, perfect hedges, smiles that didn't reach the eyes. A little too Stepford, if you ask me. I kept to myself, didn't attend HOA meetings, didn't join the bake sales. But I paid my dues and followed the rules, until they decided to make a problem out of my flagpole. The kicker? Other houses had decorative wind chimes, massive bird baths, even a 12-foot flamingo on a lawn during spring. Nobody said a word. But my polished silver flagpole, proudly flying the stars and stripes, apparently that was the line. More than just a pole. What they didn't know is that the flag wasn't just for show. Inside the folded seams, sewn carefully into the back layer, were my father's dog tags. Below the flag, inside the pole, I had inserted a sealed capsule containing his last letter to me from the front lines, and one of his Purple Heart medals. This flagpole wasn't a decoration. It was a memorial, a tombstone in cloth and metal, my way of keeping my dad close. The first confrontation. 3 days after the letter, I heard a knock. Marcia Lane, HOA president, always in pearls, always a clipboard. No soul behind the eyes. Mr. Carter, we sent you the notice about the flagpole. You have 4 days left to comply. I didn't invite her in. It's a memorial to my father. Yes, well, we appreciate service, she said, waving her hand like she was swatting away a gnat. But personal grief can't override community standards. That word, grief. As if this was about me being sad. As if this wasn't about a man who sacrificed everything. They took pictures. That night I saw them. A couple of HOA members snapping pictures of the pole from the sidewalk. Whispering. Laughing. Planning. They thought I'd fold, that I'd cave in like most people do when the HOA breathes down their neck. But they didn't know me. They didn't know my father. The box I never opened. Later that night, I went into my garage. Dust covered the top shelf. I reached up and pulled down a wooden box, his old army box. Inside was his last photo in uniform, and an unopened letter he wrote in case something happened. I never opened it. I sat there on the cold concrete floor holding the envelope. The pole outside stood strong, unmoved by the wind, like him. If they wanted to take down his flag, they'd have to go through his son. And I was ready. The fine. The next morning, I received an official fine. $500, with a note saying further noncompliance would lead to legal action. That was the final straw. I didn't remove the flag. Instead, I sent a certified letter back to the HOA. Short, direct. This flagpole is a memorial to a decorated veteran of the United States Army. Removal would violate not only moral decency but possibly federal flag display protections. Proceed at your own risk. Then I picked up the phone and made a few calls. The call that changed everything. First, I called my father's old unit commander, retired now, living in Texas. Then I called a friend of mine from college who worked at the local news station. Then, I called the veterans advocacy group he once donated to. They all listened. By sunset, I had support forming behind the scenes. But I wasn't finished. On the 7th day, when they were supposed to come remove the pole, I held a memorial barbecue. Veterans, neighbors, and even a state senator showed up. Cameras were there, local news vans, even a drone from a military vet media channel. Everyone stood, hand on heart, as I raised the flag once again. And this time, they saw what was inside. By noon that day, the street was packed. Veterans in uniform stood shoulder to shoulder in my front yard. My neighbor Dan, a retired Marine, held the grill. A young National Guard recruit raised the flag, and when it caught the wind, the crowd saluted. The news crews rolled their cameras. I stood tall in front of the flagpole. I had dressed not in protest gear, but in my father's old bomber jacket. It still smelled faintly of engine grease and oak wood. Across the street, the HOA members stood in a tight cluster, nervously clutching their clipboards, whispering. Marcia Lane was red in the face, but she kept her fake smile as a reporter shoved a mic toward her. Ms. Lane, how do you feel about the HOA's decision now, considering this flag is a memorial to a veteran? We weren't aware of the full context at the time, she stammered. This is unexpected. But it wasn't unexpected. I had told her repeatedly. She just didn't care until there was an audience. Before the event, I had quietly arranged something special. When the flag reached its full height, I gave a short speech. This isn't just cloth. This flag carries the weight of memory, of sacrifice. Inside it, my father's dog tags are stitched into the hem. Inside the pole, beneath your so-called visual hazard, are his purple heart and his last words to me. People gasped. One older man near the front began crying. A teenage boy beside him took off his cap in silence. Then I pulled out the box, the one with my father's unopened letter. And today, for the first time, I'm going to read it, because it's time his voice speaks louder than HOA rules. I opened the envelope. His words. Son, if you're reading this, then I didn't make it back. But I want you to know something. I didn't serve because I had to. I served because I believed in this country, in the people like you who make it home. Fly that flag high. Never let anyone tell you our stories don't matter. Dad. There wasn't a dry eye on the lawn. Even the news reporter lowered her mic in respect. HOA's legal pushback. The next day, I got an official email from the HOA's legal team. They claimed the event had been a public disturbance and said the flagpole still violated guidelines. But I was ready. I had retained an attorney, an old family friend and fellow veteran. He laughed at their cease and desist. Do they not realize that federal law protects memorial flag displays? You're covered under the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005. We responded with a formal letter citing the exact law and carbon copied it to local government officials, news outlets, and the neighborhood Facebook group. And then things really shifted. Community turns. Within a week, dozens of neighbors started putting up small flags of their own. Even the quiet elderly couple 3 houses down planted one in their flower bed with a little sign. In memory of my brother, KIA 1971. The neighborhood transformed overnight. The HOA tried to threaten fines, but no one paid. Someone even spray-painted a message on the sidewalk by the HOA office. Your rules don't bury heroes. The board began to fracture. 2 members resigned. Marcia tried to save face, but her reputation was shredded. The breaking news twist. Then came the twist nobody expected. The local news outlet that covered my story dug a little deeper. Turns out, Marcia Lane's husband had illegally installed a massive koi pond in their backyard without HOA approval, and had gotten away with it for years. Once exposed, he was fined $5,000 and ordered to drain it. The hypocrisy became public. People were furious. Suddenly, I wasn't the one on trial. They were. A month later, I received a letter, not from the HOA, but from the State Veterans Board. They wanted to officially designate my front yard as a community-recognized memorial site for fallen service members. We held a ceremony. Local leaders came. Military families gathered. The flagpole was officially recognized with a bronze plaque at its base. It read, "In honor of Sergeant James Carter, may his legacy never be lowered." And just like that, the pole that once offended the HOA's aesthetics became a permanent symbol of honor. One last letter.
That night, after everyone had left, I sat under the stars, the flag above me rustling gently. I took out a pen and wrote something I hadn't written in years. Dear Dad, today, I finally raised your voice high enough for everyone to hear. You didn't serve in silence, so I won't either.
I folded the letter, placed it in a sealed, waterproof envelope, and tucked it inside the pole beside his medal. His memory would never come down again. A week after the state ceremony, I thought the storm had passed, but the HOA wasn't done. They couldn't attack the flag anymore, not without facing legal and public backlash. So they changed tactics. I received a citation in the mail for unauthorized use of property for public assembly and creating a disruption by hosting a politically charged gathering. In simpler words, they were penalizing me for honoring my father and inviting the National Guard. But something else was going on behind the scenes. A retired Air Force friend who lived 2 blocks down came over with a USB drive. "You need to see this," he said. The footage showed Marcia and 2 other board members at the clubhouse mocking the ceremony and calling veterans drama queens with flags. I was stunned. These people didn't just dislike the flag, they disrespected everything it stood for. That week, I launched a private neighborhood Facebook group, Backyard Patriots. I uploaded the clip. Within 24 hours, it had 400 members. Within 48, it reached the local news again. The story hit harder this time, not because it was about a flag, but because it exposed the real rot. Veterans from the community began coming forward. A Vietnam vet named Walter shared how the HOA once told him to take down his POW MIA garden sign. A Navy widow revealed how they denied her permit for a memorial bench. This wasn't just about me anymore. The Freedom Fest barbecue. With the 4th of July approaching, I made a decision. We're throwing the biggest damn barbecue this town has ever seen, and we're inviting every vet, widow, guard, medic, and military family in a 100-mile radius. I got permits. I called local businesses, the fire department, the sheriff's office, the local VFW. Even the mayor's office RSVP'd. But my biggest surprise? The National Guard called me this time. We'd be honored to show up. No politics, just pride. July 4th, sun blazing. American flags lined the street. Tents were up. A stage was set. Kids played on bounce houses. Military vehicles were parked beside the barbecue pits. Veterans told stories under shade trees. At noon, the mayor gave a short speech. This is the America we stand for. Not gated rules and red tape, but respect, remembrance, and freedom of expression. The HOA sent out a last-minute email saying the event was unauthorized, but no one cared. The street was so full the HOA president couldn't even leave her driveway. Every news outlet in the region covered the event live. A knock on my door. Later that evening, when the fireworks had calmed and the crowd dispersed, I was cleaning up when there was a knock at my door. It was Marcia. No cameras now, no reporters, just her, looking tired and maybe a little embarrassed. "I didn't know it would go this far," she said quietly. "We just didn't want things to change." I looked her straight in the eye. But they had to. You can't shrink patriotism to fit into a manual. She nodded slowly. "We'll be holding a vote to revise the guidelines. You made your point." The letter that sealed it. 3 days later, I received an official HOA newsletter. Page 1. Amendments to HOA policy regarding memorial displays and community events. Page 2 was something I never expected. A scanned copy of a resolution, unanimous, honoring Sergeant James Carter and declaring the flagpole on my lawn a protected landmark within the neighborhood. Beneath it was a quote. "Let the flag fly, not as defiance, but as remembrance." I sat in the backyard that night, the flag waving gently overhead. My father's medals were still there, sealed safe in the pole. I remembered all the nights I wondered if his sacrifice meant anything anymore. Now I knew. It meant everything. Because of him, and people like him, we could stand, speak, push back, grill burgers with the National Guard while fireworks lit the sky. A new dawn in the neighborhood. The morning after the Independence Day event, the neighborhood felt different. For once, there was no HOA violation letter on anyone's door. No unnecessary patrols, no silent glances across yards, just quiet respect. The very flag Marcia once called aggressive now flew freely, with HOA's official recognition. Word of the barbecue reached beyond the city. A national veterans podcast did a full episode about it. An online magazine titled the story, "The Man Who Turned HOA Harassment into a Celebration of Freedom." HOA board shaken and stirred. At the next HOA meeting, something remarkable happened. The room was packed, more than any prior meeting. Walter, the Vietnam vet, stood and shared how he finally felt seen. The Navy widow spoke of finding community again. Then I stood and said just one thing. This isn't about winning. It's about remembering. Let's make sure no one in this neighborhood ever feels like their service or sacrifice makes them unwelcome. For the first time, Marcia nodded in agreement and stepped down as president. A new vote was held. A young Marine mom named Tina was elected HOA president. A lasting tribute. 2 months later, construction began on a community veterans memorial wall, right near the HOA clubhouse. Not built by the board, but by volunteers from the neighborhood. Everyone chipped in. Tools, time, donations. On the day it was unveiled, the new HOA president gave me a plaque. To Carter, for reminding us who we are and what we stand for. Beneath it, the inscription read, "In honor of those who served, those who sacrificed, and those who stood up when it mattered." My backyard, from battlefield to beacon. The flagpole in my yard became a local symbol, not of defiance, but of freedom won through perseverance. Every year now, we host the Freedom Barbecue, where veterans speak, kids learn, and flags fly without fear. Even Marcia shows up, quietly. She helps set up chairs. I once asked her why. She replied, "Because this flag, your flag, reminded me what I forgot. That it's not about rules, it's about people." Final reflection. If you had told me months ago that a flag in my backyard would start a movement, I would have laughed. But standing here now, watching neighbors gather under red, white, and blue, I realize something deeper. Freedom doesn't come from silence. It comes from standing tall when it matters, even in your front yard. And for the first time since losing Dad, I felt like I had honored him in the most American way possible, by turning my pain into purpose.